The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden light across the spires of Arundel's royal palace. Within its marble walls, a fragile peace reigned. The bustling courtyards below teemed with courtiers, guards, and servants, but behind the heavy oak doors of the throne room, trouble brewed. Princess Elena stood at her father's side, her gaze sweeping the gathered council. The air was heavy with tension, every lord and advisor watching the king with barely veiled apprehension. Lord Rowan of Eldenwood is a threat to the stability of this kingdom, Lord Rowan declared, his voice cutting through the silence. The man, broad-shouldered and silver-haired, spoke with the certainty of someone used to being heated. King Bertram shifted in his seat. He was a man who had borne the weight of the crown for decades, his features lined with age and care. Rowan believes his defiance is justified, he said, his tone even but strained. He claims to act for the protection of his people. Protection? Rowan scoffed. He raises militias, defies your commands, and refuses to pay his dues. The man is no protector, your majesty. He's a rebel. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, but Elena stayed silent. She had heard of Rowan before, whispers of a lord who defied the crown's authority, a man who sought to carve his own path in a kingdom ruled by tradition. Yet hearing his name spoken here, in the heart of her father's court, made him seem far more dangerous. Rowan is coming to the capital, Bertram announced, silencing the room. I have summoned him for an audience. I will remind him of his duties to the crown. And if he refuses? Rowan pressed, his tone pointed. The king's gaze hardened. Then he will face the consequences of his defiance. Elena's chest tightened. Her father's words carried the weight of finality, yet she sensed the doubt beneath them. He was a man who valued peace, who had always sought diplomacy over bloodshed. But how long could that last when his authority was being tested so openly? When the council dispersed, Elena lingered by her father's side. Father, she began cautiously, this Lord Rowan, what do you truly intend to do with him? Bertram sighed, his shoulders slumping. I intend to show him reason, Elena. If I cannot, then the kingdom must come first. Elena nodded, though unease tugged at her thoughts. A kingdom as vast as Arundel thrived on order, and rebellion was a threat that could not be ignored. Yet something about Rowan's defiance intrigued her. Was he truly the villain Rowan painted him to be, or was there more to his story? She didn't have to wait long to find out. The palace gardens were quiet that evening, the air cool and scented with the faint fragrance of blooming roses. Elena walked alone beneath the flowering arches, seeking a moment of peace. But her solitude was interrupted by the sight of a figure standing ahead, silhouetted by the moonlight. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his dark cloak blending with the shadows. She paused, her heart quickening with both caution and curiosity. You must be Lord Rowan, she said, her voice steady despite the tension she felt. The man turned slowly. His face came into view, a sharp jawline, dark hair that fell carelessly over his brow, and eyes that seemed to pierce through the night. He studied her for a moment before inclining his head. And you must be the princess. Aren't you meant to be with my father? She asked, stepping closer. Rowan's lips twitched into a faint smirk. I imagine your father has had his fill of me for the evening. Elena crossed her arms, unsure whether to feel insulted on her father's behalf or amused by the man's audacity. He speaks of you as a dangerous man. Then he's more perceptive than I thought, Rowan replied, his tone wry, but edged with something darker. But I'd argue that complacency is far more dangerous than rebellion. Her brow furrowed. You speak as though the crown has failed. Rowan stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. Because it has. While your father's court debates politics, villages burn. People suffer. Someone has to act. Elena's chest tightened, anger flaring in her. Careful, Lord Rowan, she said sharply. Such words could see you lose your head. And yet here I stand, he said evenly, his smirk fading. Perhaps the crown should be more careful about the enemies it makes. Before she could respond, Rowan turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving her standing alone in the garden. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with something far more unsettling. Curiosity. Who was this man who dared to defy her father? The throne room was packed the next morning as Lord Rowan stood before the king's council. His dark cloak and commanding presence seemed out of place among the finely dressed nobles, yet he held himself with the calm confidence of a man who had nothing to fear. "Lord Rowan," King Bertram began, his voice heavy with authority. "You stand accused of rebellion. You have raised a militia, refused your dues, and defied the crown. What say you in your defense?" Rowan met the king's gaze, his expression impassive. "I say that I have done what your soldiers have failed to do, protect my people." The room erupted into murmurs, but Rowan continued, his voice rising above the noise. "While you debate taxes and politics, the borders of Arundel burn. Raiders attack villages unchecked, leaving destruction in their wake. And what does the crown do? It waits. It hesitates. I will not." Elena sat at the edge of the room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Rowan's words struck a nerve, though she refused to let it show. King Bertram's brow furrowed. "You defy the crown in the name of protection, yet your actions endanger the realm's stability. You weaken us when we most need unity." "Unity?" Rowan's lips curled into a bitter smile. "There is no unity in a kingdom where the people are abandoned by their rulers. If protecting my people makes me a traitor, then so be it." The murmurs grew louder, but the king raised a hand, silencing the court. His voice was calm but firm. "Lord Rowan, your defiance cannot go unanswered. You will remain here until I decide your fate." 2 guards stepped forward to escort Rowan from the room, but he did not resist. As he passed Elena, his gaze lingered on her for just a moment, his expression unreadable. Elena's heart pounded. Rowan's words, his conviction, echoed in her mind. For the first time, she wondered if there was truth in his accusations, if the kingdom she had always believed in was not as strong as she thought. As the doors closed behind him, the room erupted into argument. The council divided on how to handle the rebellious lord. But Elena remained silent, her thoughts a storm of doubt and intrigue. The air in the dungeons was damp and heavy, the torchlight flickering against cold stone walls. Elena hesitated at the base of the stairs, her breath shallow. She hadn't told anyone where she was going, not her maid, not her guards. If her father discovered her here, the consequences would be severe. But curiosity gnawed at her. Lord Rowan's words during the trial echoed in her mind. "While we feast here in the capital, villages burn." Her father's response had been swift and decisive. Rowan was imprisoned for his insolence, awaiting a formal sentence. Yet the doubts his accusations had planted refused to fade. The guard at the dungeon's entrance regarded her with surprise, but bowed quickly. "Your Highness, I need a moment with the prisoner," she said, her voice steady. The guard hesitated before unlocking the iron door. Inside, Rowan sat on a bench, shackles binding his wrists and ankles. His dark hair was disheveled, and his eyes glinted in the dim light as he looked up. "Princess Elena," he said, his voice dry but laced with amusement. "To what do I owe the honors?" "I came for answers," she said, stepping closer. He leaned back, the chains clinking softly as he moved. "You're braver than I thought. Or perhaps more foolish. What would your father think of you visiting his dangerous rebel?" Her cheeks flushed, but she refused to let him unnerve her. "You accuse my father of weakness, yet you stand here in chains. Perhaps you're not as strong as you claim." Rowan's smirk faded, his gaze sharpening. "Strength isn't about avoiding chains, princess. It's about doing what must be done, even if it costs you everything." She faltered, his words hitting deeper than she expected. "And what must be done, according to you? Raise militias? Defy the crowns? To protect the people?" "Yes," Rowan said without hesitation. "Do you even know what it's like beyond these walls? Have you seen the villages along the borders? How they're left to fend for themselves while your father's court bickers over politics?" Elena's chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to defend her father, but his words struck a nerve. "You act as if you're the only one who cares." Rowan's expression softened slightly. "No, princess. I don't think I'm the only one who cares. But I might be the only one willing to do what it takes." Before she could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the hall. The guard returned, bowing deeply. "Your Highness, your father requests your presence in the council chamber." Elena glanced at Rowan one last time before turning to leave. His voice followed her, low and measured. "Remember what you've seen here, Princess. You won't find the truth in the throne room." Enjoying the story so far? Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. What do you think Elena will do next? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.